Wilma may have poured it up just a little too much for you. Hey dolls, it's me, Wilma Fingerdoo, with the Fingerdoo review of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 15, Episode 8. But before we get started, I want to thank some lovely people for their support. These Tipperdoos all use the YouTube thanks button, which is located just below this window. James Amala, Michael, Chuck Missildine, and Bianna Lisa. Thanks for the rupees, doll. I also want to welcome back to the Fingerdoo family on Patreon, Queen Bobby and Letty, who upgraded herself from princess to queen. I hope to see you both at the next live chat. I'm so serious. If you'd like to leave a Tipperdoo or join the Fingerdoo family on Patreon, the links are all down below in my description box. It sounds dirty, because it is. Now, without delay, Jorge, drink me! Oh, look at this. What is this? Another hot, wet slap? You're using up all the pink lemonade? That's okay with me. I'm not complaining. Yummo. All right. I'm just going to be honest with y'all. I was afraid to watch this episode. I didn't know what was going to happen. Lip sync palooza? Will more than one queen go home? Will anyone come back? Will they make us watch that horrible Daytona Wind thing again? Thank God for this hot, wet slap is all I'm saying. Not like that. Get away from me. One thing that did piss me off with all this time-saving editing that they've been making was that they'd given Lucy more camera time to whinge over not being in the top last week. It's getting as annoying as Spice's trotting. Seriously. The next day in the workroom, while Spice was going on about being a top, or in the top, or a dom twink, I wasn't really listening, to be honest. Whatever the hell it was that she was chirping away about, Jax admitted that she was upset that she hadn't won a challenge yet. Upset, not surprised. Quick as you like, Mistress asked Jax if she was as upset as Lucy was for not being in the top. That Mistress is one hell of a cook the way she likes to stir a pot. Just saying. Regardless, it was worth it to hear Jax tell Lucy she wanted to tell her to shut up with all her whining. Funnily enough, Lucy didn't think she'd done that much complaining. They never do. Now we know why they included all that footage of her whinging, I'm just saying. Speaking of whinging, Ru's shoulder pads arrived in the workroom. In other news, the 80s called and told Ru to keep them. Seriously. What was that about? Did Ru need to change up the perspective because her head had gotten so large? Because I'd heard there'd been complaints. Seriously. Maybe those shoulder pads were meant to distract the queens from this week's shocking maxi challenge. As promised, it was a lip sync LalapaRuza. Apparently, Ru wanted to see someone other than Jax lip sync for a change. So, without further ado, the queens got ready for their smackdown. Ru looked stunning in her asymmetrical off-the-shoulder number, accented by that puffy pussycat wig. And yes, Puffy Pussycat was my drag queen name in high school. There were no guests at the judges' table, just family, and by family I mean Ross and Michelle. The queens would be lip-syncing until only two bottom queens remained, and whomever lost that lip-sync would be going home. Bruno was there too. Well, someone had to spin that hopper, from which he drew the names of the queens for each round of the lip-sync palooza. But he did get to sit with the judges during the lip-sync. I have to admit, I thought he looked good sitting there. He looks good just about anywhere. If you don't believe me, check out his Instagram. Seriously. The first name Bruno pulled from the hopper was Malaysia. I think everyone was expecting her to pick Mistress to go up against, but she didn't think she was good enough to take out Mistress. Personally, that confession surprised me. I would have thought they'd have been evenly matched. Instead, Malaysia chose Marcia Cubed, which, well, surprised Mistress, or maybe more to the point, disappointed her. Clearly, she wanted Malaysia to give the people what they wanted. I have to admit, I was surprised that Malaysia picked Miss Cubed. Personally, I would have picked Spice as the easiest to lip sync against. No offense. Marcia Cubed, on the other hand, was excited. No one had seen her lip sync yet, and clearly she had some tricks up her non-existent sleeves. Plus, she got to pick the song, and she chose Boys Don't Cry by Anita. Malaysia did not look happy about it. Marcia didn't seem worried, and rightly so. Right away, she threw down a backflip and then a somersault, while Malaysia kept it old school and let her lip syncing do all the work. But it wasn't enough because when the music died, Rue announced that Marcia Cube was safe and off to relax in the Untucked lounge alone, while Malaysia would have to wait for the second round to lip sync again, bless her heart. The next name out of Bruno's hopper was Lucy LaDucas, and because she's not an idiot, she picked Spice to lip sync again. Spice picked Don't You Want to Touch Me by Joan Jett, as Titties was hoping that Lucy would lose because she thought it would push her over the edge, but there was no chance of that. Lucy killed it. She crawled, she knelt, she lip-synced the song down. Spice kind of rolled around and let Lucy feel her up there near the end, kind of. I thought Lucy was the clear winner of that lip-sync, and so did Rue, so it was off to the workroom for Miss LaDuca and Spice, who would have to cool her heels waiting for round 2, bless. Lux was the next name out of Bruno's hopper, and she picked Titties to go up against. In a sly move to throw Lux off her game, Titties eschewed the expected dance number for It's All Coming Back to Me Now by Celine Dion, and it seemed to work because Lux said she wouldn't have picked that song herself, and she didn't seem happy about the surprise. Both queens went the dramatic route. Where else were they going to go? But as Titties threw in a few laughs and a subtle stunt or two that set her apart from Lux, in my opinion. Rue must have thought so too, because shock of shocks for Lux, as Titties won. Lux did not look happy about it in her 20-inch unit. The next name that Bruno picked out of his hopper was Mistress, and she didn't pull any punches. She picked Jax, mostly because she thought Jax was going to pick the song she wanted. She wasn't wrong. Jax went the dance route and picked Tell It to My Heart by Taylor Dane. Clearly, Mistress was wearing a cover-up because otherwise, well, she was wearing her most boring costume ever. Either way, I was expecting some big things from Mistress. As for Jax, maybe it's because we'd seen her lip sync so much lately, but she really didn't impress as much as she has done before, even with all her stunts. Mistress did have a reveal, and it was gorgeous, and she impressed with her own stunts and a laugh or two tucked in for good measure. And it worked because Rue announced Mistress was safe, and it was Jax who would be doing it all again in round 2. Clearly, Jax was surprised. Bless. Back in the workroom, the other queens were clearly surprised to see Mistress walk into the room. They admitted to her that they thought she hadn't given 100%. Okay, mostly it was Lucy. Mistress seemed a little surprised to hear it, but admitted that, well, she did hold a little bit back in the off chance that she wound up in round 2. Personally, I think she was more thrown by the other queens, assuming she would have been out lip-synced by Jax. I thought she would have. Even though there were 2 queens left, Bruno still picked a name to pick the song, and it was Anitra. She picked I'm in Love with a Monster by Fifth Harmony. Everyone was excited to see these 2 powerhouses battle it out, and they weren't disappointed. Both queens threw it down hard. Sasha worked her ponytail like it was a full-time job, and Anitra slammed that stage like it owed her money. It was something to watch, but I felt Sasha was the clear winner. And I was right, because she strutted into that workroom like a warrior princess, and there was great rejoicing. Then it was time for round 2. The bottom queens took to the stage once again as Bruno spun his hopper. The first name drawn was Malaysia's again. She was mad because she wanted someone to pick her name so she could pick the song. But it seemed like she learned her lesson from the last lip sync and picked Spice this time. Spice picked Don't Go Yet by Camila Cabello because she was betting that Malaysia wouldn't know the words. Funnily enough, neither did Spice. So young. This was a bit of a cluster tuck, if you ask me, because Rue decided that Malaysia was safe, bless her heart. Needless to say, Spice was moving on to round 3. At least she didn't prance. The final 3 queens, Lux, Anitra, and Jax, had to lip sync it out to The Right Stuff by Vanessa Williams. I'm going to admit I was worried for Lux because both the other queens were such powerful dancers, but Lux kept up with them, splits for splits and death drops for death drops. But it was clear most of them weren't expecting it to be Lux when she walked into the workroom. As happy as Lux was to finally be safe, she still thought she'd been robbed that first round against us Titties. Who else is shocked? Then it was time for the last 3 queens to lip sync, but there was a dreaded twist. Only 2 of them would be lip syncing. Bruno was going to pick one name, and that queen had to pick one of the other queens to be safe. and lip sync against the remaining queen. Gasp. Anitra's name was picked, and surprise, surprise, she saved Spice. I have to say, I loved Anitra for that. She said it wouldn't be fair to lip sync against Spice. On the other hand, she said she'd have no trouble taking out Jax. Jax was gobsmacked. She thought she and Anitra were closer than that. Well, this ain't RuPaul's Best Friends race. Needless to say, the safe queens were beyond gagged to see Spice walk into the workroom, but for the most part, no one seemed mad at it. As for the remaining queens, they had to lip sync to one of my favorite songs, CeCe Peniston's Finally. This was an even match, if you ask me. Both queens threw it down. Personally, I couldn't pick a winner, but Ru did. It was Anitra who shantaed, or should I say duck walked, back to the workroom, and it was Jax, finally, who sashayed away, bless her heart. Because of the format of the Lip Sync Palooza, Untucked picked up where the episode left off, with Anitra walking into the workroom triumphant. This gave the queens a moment to talk about the lip sync pairings and what they thought of the whole shebang. Anitra reaffirmed that she wanted to save Spice because performing in a lip sync just wasn't in her wheelhouse. In her wheelhouse? I don't even think it's parked outside her wheelhouse. Of course, Spice was beyond grateful Anitra saved her because right off the hop, she was convinced that it was her night to go home. Spice then asked the workroom if anyone's performance was a surprise to the other queens. Well, of course, everyone was gagged by Marcia Cube breaking out the sexy. Mistress was surprised that Marcia picked the song she did. So was Marcia. She wanted to pick Celine Dion, but thought her outfit wasn't right for it. What's that? A skinny white girl wanted to pick Celine Dion? I'm shocked. There was some side eyes over Lucy picking Spice, but Lucy said she picked her because she thought she'd pick the Celine Dion song, but she didn't. Mistress wasn't buying it. She knew Lucy picked Spice as an easy target to beat in a lip sync and wished Lucy would just admit it. I think we all wish she would just admit it. The queens were really impressed with this Titty's performance against Luxx, but it was clear Luxx didn't want to talk about it, which is when the other queens changed gears and talked about how beautiful Luxx looked posing her way through the number. I get it. Those queens still have to share a workroom with her. Mistress's lip sync against Jax was discussed next. Although the other queens felt it was an even race, they felt that Mistress performed the number while Jax just danced through it. But clearly the biggest moment of the night was Anitra versus Sasha. The other queens admitted watching it felt more like a performance than a competition. One thing was certain, after watching the lip sync, everyone was scared of Sasha Colby. She proved that she was there to compete. I think after that lip sync palooza, we can all agree that Sasha is everyone's biggest competition. Seriously, here's to Sasha. Well done. It was also a real moment for Anitra to go up against Sasha because of all the respect she had for her. Still, Marcia said what all the other queens were thinking. Well, except for Luxx. That Anitra is also a force to be reckoned with. Malaysia picked Mistress as big competition, and that wasn't a fat joke. She picked her because, as another big queen, they've both been through some similar things in their careers. Mistress hinted that she was everyone's competition because, well, she wanted to be the first plus-size queen to finally snatch that crown. And it sounds like she's not going to let too many people get in her way. Poorest Titties, she was feeling that because she was not one of Ru's chosen faves, it was going to be hard for her to turn that around. She was clearly being down on herself again, which instigated a kumbaya moment from the other queens as they told us Titties how great she was. I have to say, for such a loud, boisterous personality, as Titties' sensitivity and fragility really breaks my heart. She knows she's fierce. She just has to start believing that she is. Seriously. In fact, all the queens praised each other, even Spice, for their individuality and uniqueness. But no matter how much love they shared, the queens still had their eyes on the prize and weren't going to back down in their fight for that crown. We even got a moment with Jax as she packed up. Of course, she was disappointed to not only be going home, but to be eliminated on a lip sync challenge as a dancing queen. I have to admit, even though I wasn't a huge fan of Jax, I was surprised she went home on this challenge too. Seriously. What about you? Do you think someone else should have gone home? Spice! Do you think Anitra did the right thing by saving Spice over Jax, or did she just prolong the inevitable? And what about Spice? She told the other queens not to count her out just yet. Could she finally turn her game around and start winning some challenges? Or will she be the next one to sashay away? Next week, the Maxi Challenge is a ball, so I'm not holding my breath for Spice, bless. And what about Lux? This wasn't a stellar week for her ego, but she did win the last sewing challenge. Could she be up for a second win? All we can do is tune into RuPaul's Drag Race next week to see how it all plays out. And when you're done, you come on back and you see me so you and I can compare notes. Now, before you go, please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and check out my links down below for ways you can help support the Fingerdoo review. Until next time, miss me! Wow, seriously, I love a hot slap. I have to say, that Lucy LaDuca is starting to come off like a bit of a coward. I don't know. I expected her to be bolder with her choices for the lip syncing. Going for Spice, that was just an easy out. And then whinging about not being on top. I totally get why queens would be upset by that, especially when they're coming from their own community as the top queen. But still, I mean, nothing's written in stone. Seriously. And that's Spice. Oh my God, she's such a cutie. But if those other queens keep feeling sorry for her, she may actually end up being in the top 4 by default. Get her out. Bless her cotton socks. I have to say, I'm enjoying Lux being thrown off her game by being in the middle. She's not enjoying that very much, I'll tell you what. She needs some fire under her narrow rear end, because I think she's another one, like Lucy, who kind of strutted into the room thinking, oh, I'm going to be fine, I'm going to kill these queens. And, you know, not every challenge is everybody's forte. I don't know, she's, if she doesn't win the sewing challenge next week, oh, what if Malaysia wins it? Oh, that would kill her. It would kill her. I can't wait. I'm terrible. I blame these hot, wet slaps.